Hey, and welcome to the Dogtor Bros, where we have an honest discussion around vet life in and out of the clinic. My name is Chris, and I'm your doc of the day and your guide through this episode. I'm here with my closest friends from vet school.
Hey, this is Adam. I am a relief veterinarian in Louisville, Kentucky.
Hey, this is Jeff. I just finished my derm residency, and I'm currently practicing in Louisville, Kentucky as an associate vet.
And hey, this is Brandon. I'm a small animal internal medicine resident at Iowa State University in Ames, Iowa.
And this is Chris again. I'm the doc of the day, and I'm a GP in North Carolina. And today we're welcoming back my good buddy, special guest, Dr. Chad Malpass. He is a small animal veterinarian in North Carolina. He graduated from the class of 2015 from Tuskegee, where he developed a special interest in surgery, carried this throughout his career as a GP. And then Chad purchased and operated and grew 2 clinics in North Carolina that were then partnered with a smaller corporate consolidator in 2020. Since then, he has served as a partner and medical director of these 10 doctor, so 2 practices and 50 support staff. Welcome back, Chad, to the Dogtor Bros.
Thank you for having me.
Well, dude, back at it again. So you know the drill now. We have a little opening game to start off before we start this episode. Would you rather be able to read your clients' minds or animals' minds?
So no thought needed on this. I would pay good money not to read my clients' minds. I really don't want to know what they're thinking. But yes, I think it's the goal of every veterinarian, right? It's like, I want to be able to, I know I'm able to communicate with this animal better than someone else, which is why we do this for a living, right? I mean, you pick up on so many different cues. So yeah, being able to read an animal's mind or Dr. Doolittle things would certainly decrease some time and workup on these cases for sure.
I would also choose the animal's mind because I love my clients, but you know what? Let's go with the medicine is the most important. So if I can know exactly what my patients are thinking, that's what's most important. And I've got pretty good client education, so I'll hold back. I'll stick directly in their minds for the animals.
This is Brandon. Yeah, I 100% agree. My life would be so much easier if I could know what my patients were thinking, and just to kind of continue the consensus. I don't know that I'd want to know what my clients are thinking at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty straightforward, right? We're veterinarians. Make our job a hell of a lot easier if we knew what the pets were thinking.
Yeah, this is Chris, and that was pretty much a softball of a question. We all know the answer for that one. I don't want to know what my clients are thinking. As Chad alluded to, they've already opened up too much sometimes about some certain things. They've shown us some things. I'm definitely just want to worry about what's going on with your pet here. So back to Chad here. So opening up, you bought a practice. You bought 2 practices. So walk us through the process of what you did to go about buying a practice. How did you do it? Did you look at multiple practices? Kind of what was your thought process on becoming a practice owner?
Gracious. This is a short question with potentially a long answer, but I'm going to give you the short version. My first practice actually negotiated a verbal agreement in vet school to purchase. So talked with the practice owner, the same place that I got out of the shower back in 2008 and went and got a job. If you guys were listening to a previous episode of the Dogtor Bros. So the practice that I was a technician at and kind of cut my teeth in the industry, I knew I wanted to come back to my hometown. I had a lot of ties here, and this was one of those hometown practice opportunities. I knew he was looking to sell within the next 3 to 4 years. So we kind of, predicated me joining him out of vet school on purchasing that practice. And he was an awesome guy who I'm very fond of, still think a lot of, and taught me a lot of good lessons. But he did retire 3 or 4 years later, and we were able to buy that practice. So that one was probably a little bit more of maybe a little bit easier to buy the first one. The second one was a little bit more challenging, right? Because you've got to have practice one going steady enough to take day-to-day operation attention away from that to go invest in the new practice. So this is another local-ish practice, happened to be, all the veterinarians in our area know each other pretty well. So, I mean, it's just a small network of guys, but this doctor I knew was selling his practice. He was a little bit older, and neither of these practices were, what we would kind of consider corporate candidates. They essentially just didn't have enough doctors or weren't producing enough revenue. Those are kind of the two big criteria there. And so they were both kind of under that corporate radar. So they were definitely practices that were going to be purchased by a private veterinarian. And that just happened to be me. So honestly, I got to give some credit to timing and just kind of betting on myself, which ultimately is something that you just have to do to go down this path, just betting on yourself. So the process and the actual steps that took to, create entities and create, and to get in good standing with the board and financing and, actual practice acquisition and transition, all those things. I mean, we could talk about that for, an entire year of episodes, but there's the short picture or the short story of what we did.
No, that's awesome. I mean, good kind of starting point there. I know you mentioned that they basically, they weren't on the corporate radar yet. They were kind of in your wheelhouse for doing it. How did you vet it to make sure that it was a match for you? Like, what was something that you did there to make sure, hey, this is something I want to purchase?
Again, fantastic question. Fortunately, in this scenario, I was able to vet, the first practice that I purchased, Westchester Veterinary Hospital, pretty well. I mean, I was able to vet it as a vet there. So, I mean, that's about as good as something can be vetted. So, I was very familiar with, all of the opportunities and areas for improvement, areas that kind of required, some love. And so I had a pretty decent understanding of the worst case scenario, and that as far as actually vetting to see if they were a feasible or a viable business opportunity, obviously reached out to some professionals, an actual practice evaluator to say, hey, is what's the value of this practice? What can I afford to pay for this practice and still make a living? And went down that pathway as well, for both practices. Something we can talk about more in this episode or future episodes, but something that I would absolutely recommend, someone I was consulting to do, is to have a practice formally evaluated.
Well, continue though. What does that process entail? What would that do for someone looking to buy a practice? What does the practice evaluator do? I mean, I know they evaluate the practice, but what is that like? What do they bring to the table to help you make that decision?
So they're going to bring the feasibility aspect to the table, right? So, they cannot help. I mean, this is very much like your accountant. Most of these guys are have a strong accounting backgrounds, either are certified veterinary accountants or CPAs or something. They're not going to be able to help you with a lot of things in the process. So how's what's the building like? Is this something that we can workflow in? Is this something that we can grow in? They can't really help you too much there. What's the team like? Do I have the proper, management structure? Do I have, do I have a team that I want to retain? Do I have a team that we can work with? What's the culture like? All those things, those are things that you have to vet out independently. What's my work-life balance going to be in general? Those are things that they have to, you have to kind of answer through other channels. But for a practice evaluator, they're the guy that says, yes, this is what the practice historically produces in terms of cash flow. Cash flow is king. Cash flow is everything in buying a business. This is how much cash flow is available if you were to purchase this business, based off of, for example, the last 3 years tax returns from that business. And then they factor in your debt service to say, well, this is going to be the amount that you're going to have to pay monthly or yearly, however they calculate it, and pull that out of that cash flow. And so essentially they're letting you know what you walk home with as a business owner after the debt service, after paying back the loan to buy the practice. So obviously, the more you pay for the practice, the bigger that loan is, the bigger that nut is, the harder that nut is to crack, the harder it is to cash flow after the debt service. So feasibility is the word there. Is this a feasible practice option? Can I buy this and make money every month, or am I going to buy this and have to continue to sink money into it every month? And generally, for my recommendation, I've got some. I'd have to reach out and talk to the guy that I spoke with, but certainly would not have any problems name dropping him in a future episode if he doesn't. But there's some fantastic guys out there that do this that can really give you a very accurate estimation of what to expect.
No, that's awesome, man. That's good to know, because I mean, even like I've known a little bit now since talking with you, but for most of our listeners who've thought about owning a practice or have never owned a practice or anything like that, you don't know what these processes are until you start going through it and trying to figure out, okay, how much money is this going to make me? What am I going to be able to do with it? And you need, this evaluator kind of tells you, hey, you're going to be sinking for a while before you can start floating or something like that. And I know you mentioned it also goes with work-life balance and how to figure out, is this what you want? Do you want to be a one doctor practice? Do you want to be a multi-doctor practice? You have to figure that sort out on your own, looking at the building, looking at the workflow. That plays a factor for a lot of this. So if you, and this is a question for everybody, if you had to do it again, would you buy a practice now, or would you start one up from scratch?
So let me do this. Let me pose it to you guys, and then I'll answer the question. Jeff, if you were going to do a practice, would you buy a derm practice or would you start up a derm practice?
Where I'm at now, honestly, would probably buy into the place that I'm at. So we happen to be a part of like lots of sister hospitals. It is, I guess you might call it like a small corporate that we're in California, we're here in Kentucky, obviously, Florida, and growing. But I really like the culture of where we're at here and where I'm working. And I guess from a business aspect, I see the growth that my company is doing. I never envisioned myself ever owning a practice. I wasn't interested. I wasn't one of those kids in vet schools. Like I really need to own a practice. I actually really didn't want to own a practice because it seems like a big headache and sounds like taking on extra debt. But I was gonna, right now where I'm at, I don't have interest in starting one from scratch. I've worked really hard. I've done a lot of extra training. I really just want to work, but I could see myself buying into where I'm at now and being really successful with it. So that's what I would do.
Awesome. All right. So we got one as a buy-in. Adam, what do you think? You buying in or you starting up? Buying in or out, I guess.
I kind of, since vet school, have flirted with the idea of, being an owner at some point. I'll have times where I'm like, yeah, it's going to happen. And then times where it's like, hell no, it's not. I've seen both ends of the spectrum. I've seen vets that have branched out from other practices who have bought existing practices, and vets that have branched out and built from the ground up, so to speak. Just kind of given my limited knowledge on things that I've seen, especially, I think I would go more towards buying in. I think it's good just to kind of have that base there, something to kind of build off of. And it kind of gives you a little bit more, you're already coming into a working system. So I feel like it's a little bit easier to learn as you go that way, instead of just starting from scratch and building yourself up. Plus you already have that established clientele. So I think I would buy in.
Chris, I'm saving you for last. Brandon, what you think, buddy?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with everyone so far, as far as like if you were going to start one, whether you'd buy in and take over eventually versus start up from scratch. I mean, just having an established clientele is such a big deal. So like that would be an easy decision for me. As far as like whether or not I would versus would not, I'm in like no rush to pursue any sort of practice ownership, management position, anything. I'm just a good foot soldier right now, and I'm happy there.
Easy to say on a soon-to-be internal medicine specialist salary. It's always a good foot soldier role to be.
Exactly, that's right.
But well earned for sure. It didn't come for free. Chris, this will be my last part of my podcast takeover as I'm now hosting. Chris, what do you think? Would you be more inclined to buy an existing practice or start up?
Well, I just want to say thanks for having me on.
Happy to be here.
No, I mean, I think I'm going to be the odd man out, and I'm going to flip flop, and it's going to be depends on the situation of where I'm at in the practice or in life in general, and what I want to do. I think startups have their own. You can kind of just start from the get going, and you can do your own thing, and I think that's kind of a unique opportunity. I think it's a super awesome idea for someone like JT and Brandon, just from the specialty thing, because there's such a need for specialists. You could literally open up your doors and be like, I'm a derm vet or I'm an internal medicine. I need to see patients. And you could just tease it the week before and you'd be booked for the next month from the general area. So from a startup perspective, you guys would be just hit the ball rolling. You don't even need a clientele. It'd be there. It's already there. Everyone needs specialists. So I think that's from that perspective. And then from buying in, if it makes sense, the numbers make sense, or it's a buyout, you got again, that's where the evaluator comes in and make sure the math. If it makes sense to buy in and you're going to cash flow it, and then you're going to have a good quality of life, then yeah, that's the way to go. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. It's just whatever you prefer and how you think it'll work out for you. Yeah, I mean, I know it doesn't really answer anyone's question, but it's kind of in the middle.
I love the answer to that. I think that that's a really solid answer, and especially in a little bit more catered to the GP lane, right?
Mm-hmm.
As Chris and I are in that lane, being open, if practice ownership is what you want to do, I think being open to either opportunity is worthwhile. Some benefits of buying a existing business is, generally speaking, if you don't pay too much for the practice, you're making money day one outside of your salary. So when you're buying a business, you really don't want to count the fact that you're going to pay yourself a salary, right? So if you're able to pay yourself $125,000 or whatever this number is, well, you could also go work for someone else and make that same money. So that's not the money that you're really factoring when you're buying a business. You're not buying, and we'll say this as many times as you guys have me on this, I'll keep saying it. You don't want to buy a job, you want to buy a business. So you're looking for the excess profits after you pay the salary and after you're paying all the debt service. And if you find the right practice that exists, that has those things that Chris, was talking about, that has the culture, that has the location, that has the building that you can see yourself at, that's a really good way. That's a really comfortable way to kind of identify that. A lot of time, that can be that hometown practice, like in my situation, or a practice that you've worked at where you've got an owner that's phasing out, and maybe that practice is not quite a corporate consolidator. They're kind of like your normal 2-doctor practice, 1.5 doctor practice, something like that. Really good opportunities exist there. Gun to my head, I probably would be more inclined to do a startup. Because I've done the buyout a couple times, and obviously it worked out really, really well. I would be open to it again if the right deal came along, right? I mean, but doing a startup now, now that there's more capital available, and then there's the cookbook. I mean, that's the big thing. The amount that I've learned from operating these 2 clinics, I really would feel comfortable going in kind of in that same situation Chris described. Like, I know what it's going to take to run this hospital, and would feel comfortable doubling down and betting on myself. Really, that's what you're doing as a startup. You're doubling down on yourself. You're saying that I can build this from scratch. And the cool thing is one day, if your objective of it is to go and sell this, which is one path that we can talk about, one day I'm not going to owe it. When I go to sell this, I'm not going to have to pay off this big loan with the proceeds from that sale, or I'm not going to have to pay this $1 million or $2 million back, $10,000 a month for the next 15 or 20 years, or 10 years. So I would probably be more inclined to doing a startup, and maybe something that is just a little bit different than the average veterinary clinic, something that kind of sets that clinic a little bit more unique. So that would probably be what I'd chase after.
For sure. And I know, we kind of have similar answers just because I know we hang out a lot. So I think that's going to sway how we think and everything too. So, but yeah, no, I think there's pros and cons of both, and you can just got to make the list and figure out what works out for you. And then again, this is for everybody. do you guys think you should own a practice? Does everyone have to own a practice at some point, or you just say, hey, just be an associate, you're good, and you don't have to do it? I feel like becoming a practice owner now, there are less and less vets that want to do it or will do it. And I guess let's try and change the question. Why do you think that is? Why do you think there are less people that want to be practice owners or own practices?
This is Adam, and I'll kind of refer back to a previous episode that we talked about when we were talking about staff shortages, about how a lot of new vets are looking for that work-life balance. And I think that might play a factor in that. People not wanting to own as much is that they do want more of a work-life balance. They want more free time. They want more time to either build a family or more time to experience things they want to do outside of work. So I think that may be one thing that kind of steers people away from ownership, because they know the time that it takes. Again, I don't know that for sure. Just kind of speculation on trends that I've seen with the field. Again, for me personally, I'd kind of go back and forth. I'm on the fence on it. One day yes, one day no. So we'll see what the future holds. But, again, I think that just may be a big factor in it, is people kind of want more of that work-life balance that they get as an associate as opposed to a business owner.
And this is Jeff. And I think I think you're spot on with some of those points. And another point I would make is that I think a lot of people, when you go through vet school, we get very limited, if any, business education. There are some schools that do have some. Ours was mostly through like VBMA, Veterinary Business Medical Association, which we were all involved in, which we'll talk about on another day in depth, I'm certain. But when you go out and you want to make your own practice, you automatically have to be an entrepreneur. And so instead of just being a veterinarian, you now have to add this element of, I need to start something potentially from scratch or buy into something. And now I have to add this additional education on board and also be successful with it in this field, where people go out and get, an MBA potentially, or just learn it on your own and figure it out as you go. Kind of like Chad, you're talking about, you kind of learned and build upon what you learned to be successful, and it worked out. And just that thought of that can be, I imagine, pretty overwhelming. Like you said, Chris, like I could potentially, finish my specialty and start up my own practice, but to be successful business wise, I'd probably have to move, go somewhere where there's no other dermatologists, so I can't work with my current colleagues, and start up my own clientele and do all the marketing and all the business sides, and all those things are all doable. But then I also have to be this entrepreneur who's working an excess amount of hours again, and like Adam said, like there's no work-life balance there, at least to start. So you have to be really committed and passionate, I think, if you're going to follow that path. And it's doable, obviously. People do it all the time from GP and specialist level. But I think the thought of getting there is a lot.
Well, and you don't know what you don't know, right? I mean, if you've never done it, and so going back to my last answer, currently I would do a startup. But if the listeners out there and you don't know which one and you haven't done this, I wouldn't recommend you lean down that startup route, So just to kind of clarify that, not to push anyone down the wrong route, but you don't know what you don't know until you know it. And so, there's so many different barriers to becoming a practice owner for most people in their mind. They're really not, as bad or as challenging as they seem. I mean, they're kind of scary, right? I mean, you've got to talk to bankers, and you've got to talk to attorneys, and you've got to talk to the board and accountants, and you've got to learn these things. And, there's some fantastic books out there on it. There's a lot of mentors out there that can kind of help you guide, anyone that's bought a practice is worth, taking to lunch out there. I'd advise listeners, if you got a guy that you think has done it right, offer to take him to lunch. More than likely he's going to buy your lunch, but, at the same time, he or she, but, just learn what you can from those guys. But why they're not doing it, Chris, to your answer, dude, it is a grind. I mean, it is a grind. And it is not for everyone. Just, to answer that question, it is absolutely not for everyone. I don't even think being a full-time vet is for everyone, right? I mean, there's different levels of what people's bandwidths are, but for that person that has, that feels like they've got a little bit extra bandwidth, it's a really productive way to use your time. But don't kid yourself. I mean, it's it's a lot of work. And if you really put it on if you put it on an accelerated pace, I mean, it takes a lot of effort. So that work-life balance gets tossed. My recommendation there is, what I told my wife, and this is a conversation that everybody has to have with their family, because I mean, good gracious, your family is a big part of this decision. I want to do this. I want to work an abnormally large amount of time over the next 5 years so that I can work less for the next 40 years. And that's a super hard sell to make in real time when you're putting down 80-hour weeks and, you're going through that. But, I still haven't figured out the working all the way less just yet, but, so still keeping my calendar pretty busy, but, certainly set the ground to not have to work quite as hard at, towards 50 and 60 years old.
Yeah, this is Brandon. And we kind of talked on this when you were on last time, but like I'm like from a family that my dad owns his own business, and it's like you said, it's not for everyone. It's a grind. You're like always on essentially. And my dad, like, fortunately, is very successful, and he's going to retire real happy, hopefully in the next 5 years or so from now. I think the other like part of people not wanting to go down the practice ownership route is just like the competition right now is tough. There's a lot of corporate practices out there, and it's kind of hard to compete with that, like kind of ability to bankroll things. I think that like anyone that's taking that risk and like trying to go into practice ownership, like the failure side of things is it's a big deal. Like that could be your livelihood. Whereas maybe a corporate ownership, like they're like, all right, well, this practice just didn't work out. We've got our budget that we can kind of sweep that by and move on. And then the benefits of being a veterinarian in a corporate practice, there's pros and there's cons too, but the pros are pretty big. You got the set 401k with matching, and you've got like set hours. And that work-life balance is much easier on the majority of folks.
Brandon brings up a really good point about, what's happened in the market in the last really decade or so with the, the consolidation of so many veterinary practices. Cutting right to it. If you've got a practice that you're looking at that's, got 2.5 or more full-time equivalent veterinarians, and that produces a gross revenue of greater than $2 million, it's going to be really hard for you as an individual to really buy that practice. That practice is so long as it is a profitable practice, is a corporate candidate. And truthfully speaking, you can't pay you shouldn't pay what they're offering. You won't make as they can afford to make a little bit less return on a larger investment. As they're buying 100 practices at a time, you really can't afford to pay the same rate that they're paying. So, great point that Brandon brings up there. That knocks out half the practices that are available for purchase. I think maybe already 30, 40, maybe 40% of practices are already currently held by a corporate consolidator. So of the other 50 to 60%, maybe half of those are almost untouchable, just because you can't compete as a private veterinarian whenever you go to try to buy those practices. So, inventory drying up is a big part of that as well. And there's probably a lot of folks out there keeping their eyes out for good practices to buy, and they're not really there. They're not as prevalent as they were.
No, for sure. And I mean, all of you guys bring up good points. And I do think kind of going with the corporate side of things, I mean, it's kind of changed the game for us in general. I mean, you said the last decade, even the last couple of years, it seems like there's more corporate groups buying out the practices, which is not saying good or bad. It's more just this was happening in the game of veterinary medicine. So it's definitely just something to think about. And I know, Brandon, you alluded to the failing thing, and I don't know, it's always in the back of your mind, but it's kind of hard to say. There's not many vet practices out there that I would say are failing unless you're just not showing up to see your clients at all. Like, I'm pretty sure if you show up to work, you will start seeing pets fairly quickly just for how busy we all are. I know we all it seems to have gotten busier the last 3 to 4 years. It's just been taking off in the veterinary medicine. Well, kind of to wrap things up here and going away from the business side and owning a business and kind of how Chad did it, kind of end off here with a question. So Chad, if an actor had to play you, what actor would it be?
I'd have to go with Morgan Freeman. He's a fantastic actor, multiple Grammys or Emmys, whichever one actors win. He played the Lord Almighty. He played a penguin. Top tier, that guy. World class.
I can't.
Are you saying that he couldn't do a great job? I mean, you guys need to have Morgan on next. I suspect he'd have something to say about that.
He does have an open invite, so I mean, we'd love to have him on.
Yeah, we've reached out. We have not heard back. Yeah.
This is Brandon. I'm gonna go with Tom Cruise because you don't have to do anything with his height. We're already there.
I wanted to make the joke so bad. I'm so glad you said it first. I was like, because he's short.
I mean, it'd be easy. And he's a damn good actor.
That's easy for me to say. He makes way more money than I do. So, like, what can I say?
You think, he does a lot of his own stunts. Do you think he would do his own stunts, like working with cats?
Oh, yeah. He'd be doing his own endoscopies. I'll train him. It'll be good.
Yeah.
This is Jeff. For me, it is a clear Jesse Williams. If anybody's seen Grey's Anatomy, he is chef's kiss, maybe the most attractive. Is he my celebrity crush? Maybe. That's not what this is about. But I think he'd do a great job, and he's a lot of fun. Highly recommend for me.
Also has an invite to the show, just to clarify.
1,000,000,000,000%.
Okay.
Awesome. We'll reach out. We'll get our people to talk to his people, and we'll see what we can do.
Yeah. We got a guy. He was on TV. I was on TV once. Like, we'll get some connections.
I mean, you definitely were. How about you, Adam?
How about you, Chris? All right.
Stop trying to take over our podcast.
For me, I don't really know. What do you? This is dangerous, but I'm gonna let you guys pick. Who do you think should play me in the movie?
Tom Hanks.
I'll take it. Tom Hanks.
I was gonna say Robert Downey Jr., but
okay, I'll take that too.
Let's go with he looks just like you. Is Chris Hemsworth? You guys have the same physique and everything. So,
oh my God, I was thinking the same thing.
Okay, yeah, I think that's accurate. Yeah.
Oh, uncanny.
The hair is there with them, so
they did ask me to be a stunt double.
Oh yeah,
but I had to turn them down for the podcast we were recording that night. So,
oh damn,
makes sense. Makes sense. Oh man,
totally.
For me, this is Chris. I don't know. Let's throw in another Chris. Let's do like Chris Pratt or Chris Evans, one of those guys. We'll just keep it with the Chris's. All right. So if you wanna reach out to Chad, just reach out through us, and then we'll get you in contact with him. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Dogtor Bros. If you enjoyed it, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or anywhere where you listen to your podcast. We would truly appreciate it. It would also help us out if you could share this episode with others who may be interested in today's topic. You can also tell us what you want to hear. Drop suggestions in the comments or shoot us an email at thedoctorbros@gmail.com or DM us at thedoctorbros on Instagram. Again, this is Chris. You can reach me on Instagram at dr.chrishernandez.
And this is Adam. You can find me on Instagram at Dr. Adam DVM. That's DRADAM DVM.
And this is Jeff. You can find me on TikTok and Instagram at Derm Dr. Jeff, DERMDOGTORJEFF.
And this is Brandon. You can reach me on Instagram at Dr. Mason IM.